So here are 10 massive transfers that impact England, Thomas Tuchel, and the World Cup squad next summer. We got to start with the big news of today. Eberechi Eze's deal to Tottenham is not going ahead because Eberechi Eze's deal to Arsenal looks like it very much is. This is a fascinating player to talk about, George, in an England context, because he is very much on the fringes, has done some good stuff, but only in little bits and bobs. Plays in an area of the pitch where there's a discussion to be had about his fit, whether he's needed or not, whether his pathway into the first team is blocked or not. And he might be an Arsenal player as they challenge for the Premier League this season. It's exciting.
It's interesting because he's 27 years old. What he's done at Crystal Palace over the last 5 years is exceptional. What he did at QPR prior to that in the Championship set him apart as, quite obviously, in terms of pure talent, one of the best players we've ever seen in the Championship. And it's great to see his career progress. And it's been great to see Arsenal fans get incredibly excited about signing an English attacking player. It's funny that he's only got 12 caps for England. Like, I think it's a sign of how strong we are now that a player of his profile can be, not a young player, but still in the infancy of their international career. And that will, I'm sure, change when it comes to his move to Arsenal. There are similarities, I think, in terms of Jack Grealish's move to City and Eberechi Eze's move to Arsenal, where in my mind, when Grealish, who was on the fringes of the England squad but wasn't quite getting in, moved to City, it was going to be the making of him, and initially it kind of was. But then quickly, for whatever reason, he struggled to find to settle into the team again, and it kind of caused his England career to be over, and question marks over his best position and other things. It's kind of the same with Eze now, where this will absolutely catapult him into a different stratosphere in terms of where he sits in the England pecking order. We have to assume he's going to play quite a lot of football off the left-hand side, but for Arsenal, with Saka off the right and normally Martinelli on the left, they play in quite a rigid way in terms of the player off that left-hand side isn't really given that much of a free role. But with Eze, there's no way you want to limit him to being a left winger. You need him to come inside and impact games from through the middle, where because of Odegaard's presence, he's probably unlikely to play as a natural 10. So I think we are going to learn a lot about Eberechi Eze over the next 12 months as to what footballer he's going to be. But it's incredibly exciting. He's a player that should have a massive England future, that should be in the conversation for starting positions going forwards. The other kind of caveat to this is that they've signed Noni Madueke, and given that they've got Bukayo Saka at right wing, the assumption was maybe they were signing Madueke to be a kind of genuine left winger. And maybe having the option of having Madueke and Eze as two very different options on that left-hand side makes sense. But again, another player in Madueke who we can imagine will be a big part of Thomas Tuchel's plans and will get into squads. So really exciting. I assume we'll see him, given that he started against Senegal in the next England squad, and given Jude Bellingham's absence, we might see him play in a more central role again. But what a player, someone who is yet to really, explode onto the international scene. But I think it's a matter of time until he does.
I think one of the interesting things is that how Thomas Tuchel views this move in terms of how important he feels Eze is to his plans, not just for the squad, because he's obviously going to be in the squad. He's been in the squad so far, and he's in the mix. But at the moment, he's not a nailed-on starter for England. And obviously, there are a lot of competitions for places at 10 on the right and the left. He will likely play for Arsenal. And it'd be interesting to see. We're not sure exactly how it's going to work yet. But if he plays off the left, whoever he plays for, if you're playing off the left, he isn't actually going to come inside anyway. And I was looking at some graphics earlier that Opta put out of all of his touches in play for Palace last season. And most of them are in the sort of left-hand half space, sort of as a sort of left number 10 anyway, which, so even if he does play nominally as a left winger, he's going to come inside, whatever. But I just think it's interesting in terms of Tuchel, as we've spoken about before on the pod, he makes references quite a lot to players playing in the Champions League and players playing for teams that are challenging for trophies. And he's won a trophy recently with Palace, but this is obviously a level up.
On two.
And I think it's, does this kind of, once he's bedded in at Arsenal, when he starts playing for Arsenal and he's playing for a team, going for the Premier League and with designs of going deep into the Champions League as well, does that give him more hope of a chance of starting for England? Will Tuchel take him a bit more seriously, perhaps? Because he obviously knows his talent and he's a good player. He's a great player. But if you're one of the competitors for his spot in the England team, if you're Anthony Gordon, for example, you might be looking at this deal going, maybe this actually harms my chances, makes it even more difficult for me to get a start for England now that Eze is presumably going to be going up another level. But on the flip side of that, George, what you just mentioned with Grealish is really interesting, because Eze is going to go from being at Palace, being the main man, to being at Arsenal, being one of quite a few main men. And the system that he plays in will change a little bit. The style of football will be different from what he was playing under Glasner at Palace. And we've seen with Grealish, initially it worked quite well and he had that great season when they won the treble, but it's obviously declined since then. He's had to move out to Everton. It's not a given that Eze just goes to Arsenal and it just all goes his way and that he continues to be this player that he is, this amazing dribbler, this sort of really exciting attacking player. There is a chance that he has to adapt his game a little bit, albeit if you listen to what he's said in the past himself, I don't think he's necessarily going to really be up for that.
Not a
so
big
it can be interesting.
But yeah, I mean, he has developed a lot as a player, but he has retained the same ultimate personality, and it's a joyous one. He's one of the most fun players to watch on the planet, and it will be interesting to see whether that is maintained in an Arsenal team with a manager who loves structure, who loves automated movements, and who currently doesn't have a lot of time for free roll dribblers. Even someone like Saka, who's incredible off the dribble, an incredible goal threat and creator and dribbler, but he's able to play in exactly the way that Arteta wants. And Glasner's an amazing coach as well, and it's not like Eze has just been floating around doing whatever he wants. He's adapted so much tactically since he jumped up to the Premier League. He's definitely improved as a goal scorer since he jumped up to the Premier League, and that's a massive string to his bow, and massive for England as well, because we want goal scorers from all over. I love him so much. I'm really excited about the move. Can he prove himself as truly elite in his position in the world? And can he prove himself as an England starter? I think both of those, I'm not 100% confident because of the competition at Arsenal, because of the positional discussions that we're talking about and the roles that are likely to be open or not to him for both England and Arsenal. The one thing I will say definitively is he is going to really suit playing in massive games in the Premier League and in the Champions League. And that's for a tactical reason, basically. The top level games right now at club level, the man-to-man marking and the man-to-man press that most teams go for out of possession, Eze is an absolute cheat code for that because he is so good at dribbling and so hard to stop. And there's a very famous game earlier on his career against Leeds, who were managed by Bielsa in the Championship, when Leeds were the best team in the league and they were doing this insane man-to-man press that basically no one in the Championship could handle. And QPR went up there and Eze was playing for QPR. I think he completed something like 12 dribbles against Leeds that day. They couldn't get near him. They had to resort to fouling him. He's obviously only got better in time, and his performance in the FA Cup final showed that he could do it at elite level. But the one thing I'm excited about is I know there'll be at least one massive game, whether it's in the Premier League against a Chelsea or a Liverpool or a City, or in the Champions League perhaps, where Eze will be the star because of that super skill that he has that very few players have. When it comes to international football, I actually think that skill is dampened slightly. I don't think it's as valuable, really, because teams are rarely going to play that way against us. So just dribbling through a deep block is quite difficult for anyone to do, whether you're Grealish or Eze or whoever. So I sort of think that his superpower is better suited to Arsenal and thriving there than it is maybe for England.
I agree, and I think another positive of this is you mentioned Thomas Tuchel's kind of tactical demands, and I think there are similarities in terms of certainly structure between Tuchel and Arteta in terms of what they demand from their players, where a player playing kind of a floating free role isn't necessarily the way they like to operate. But I think, especially if you think back to Germany last summer and how awkward our front line looked, where it was really difficult to find a way to kind of wedge all our players in together, and kind of on paper you'd think with a number 10, whether that's Bellingham or whoever else, Saka on the right hand side, where it feels like Saka playing on that right hand side, if he's fit, as long as he doesn't have a terrible season this season, is probably the one, along with Kane, but that's another discussion, is the one guy who's going to start and going to play that role. If we do have a season of Mikel Arteta working out a way to best use Eberechi Eze and Bukayo Saka in the same system, in a pretty similar system to the way that England play, that's got to be a benefit, because last year when we tried to play a player who liked to peel off the left-hand side with Saka on the right-hand side and Kane up front and Bellingham as 10, it looked absolutely horrendous. So yeah, we need to learn from that. And I, we've seen Tuchel play Eze in the 10 already, and it wouldn't surprise me if that is possibly where he sees him, with a more, not necessarily instead of Bellingham, but as another option in there with a Gordon or a Rashford, or someone who can be that kind of more playing off the last man, high and wide on the left, as being the option there.
And then we bring Cole Palmer into play, and we work out that we've got too many good players, and no one yet has worked out
Foden,
the
Grealish.
definitive way of fitting them all into a team, and that is Tuchel's challenge. So Eze's deal is a massive one, but there's been loads of other movement for either established England internationals or those who would like to be that. Dave, you're going to act as our Spanish correspondent here, because of course, both with Trent moving to Real Madrid and then Marcus Rashford moving to Barcelona, we've got even more reason to watch El Clasico this season. They will possibly go literally head-to-head in those games, which will be absolutely fascinating. And of course, in Trent, we've got a guy that's only played 26 minutes so far in Tuchel's 4 games. He was injured for the first camp. He came off the bench against Andorra for 25 minutes when Curtis Jones had started at right back. And against Senegal, he was an unused sub. So in that sense, has some work to do to become England's starting right back, as many people think that he will and maybe already should be. And from a Rashford point of view, he was kind of like a really important part of Tuchel's first squad and a slightly less important part of his second squad.
Yeah, although Rashford did have a hamstring injury towards the end of the season as well, didn't he? But with Trent, he made that move in the summer. They got it. They sort of fast-tracked it through so he could play for Madrid in the Club World Cup, and I think he made 5 appearances in the Club World Cup, and Madrid obviously didn't win it, and they went out or whatever. But in terms of so far this season, he's had 1 game for Real Madrid in the league. They beat Osasuna 1-0 at the weekend, and he went off after 68 minutes. Okay. And I saw a piece in the Daily Mail earlier on, which was a classic sort of...
Was that over your breakfast?
Yeah. Every morning. I get a subscription,
Postman
actually.
Yeah.
Physical copy. And it was basically one of those pieces where they just get a load of tweets from Liverpool fans lauding it over him because he's been subbed after 68 minutes, and they chuck a few stats in saying it was a nightmare. I don't know if it was a nightmare, to be honest with you. In the same sentence, they said he lost the ball 15 times, but that he did complete all but 1 of his passes. So I don't quite know how that works.
Just getting tackled loads.
He did get subbed off for Real Madrid, so it'll be interesting to see how his first proper season, how his first season at Madrid goes. But you would think that compared to Rashford, who we'll talk about in a minute, you would think it should be fairly straightforward. He'll establish himself in that team. They'll either win the league or come second. They should go deep into the Champions League. And if you look at England's other right-back options, Kyle Walker is fading out of the picture, but will still probably be involved. But he's going to be at Burnley this season. Does Ben White get a look in at some point?
Reece James is surely
Reece James is obviously a favourite of Tuchel's and has played well for him so far in his game so far as England manager. But Trent, surely, you would imagine, should be the first choice right back for England going into the World Cup. You'd be surprised if he wasn't, but you don't know. I think Reece James.
It's a bit of a journey to get there, though.
I think so, but there's been some mitigating circumstances. He was injured, as you said, and look, that summer camp, the June friendlies, they were a bit weird. I think bedding in to his new team across these 3 international breaks in September, October, November, I think they're 3 really important camps. We'll talk about that separately, perhaps in the next pod. But I think by the end of those 3 camps, I'd be surprised if Trent hasn't played the majority of those and started most of those games if he's fit.
And what about Marcus?
Well, Rashford is interesting. Now, I watched the interview that he did with Gary Lineker and Mika Richards the other day, and it was really good. And it was very encouraging from point of view of just seeing how Rashford is, because we know he's had some difficult times. It ended badly for him at Manchester United. He had this little brief resurgence at Villa, which seems to have really given him a lift, but now he's gone to Barcelona, which is a massive challenge for him. But he seems to be in a really good place. He seems to be confident. They were talking to him about England as well and about the World Cup, and it's clear that England is very important to him. And if you look back over his career, this is his 10th season now. He's been around a long time. He's played a lot for England, and whilst he hasn't always been considered a nailed on starter for England. He has contributed quite a lot over the years. His goal record isn't too bad. He was a big part of Southgate's kind of middle era. And the challenge he's got at Barcelona is getting in the team, because you've got the front three of Rafinha, Lewandowski and Lamine Yamal. Like, Rashford wants to play off the left. That means you're going to have to get rid of Rafinha. He didn't start the first game against Mallorca. They won 3-0. He came off the bench.
Rafinha scored.
With 20 minutes to go.
Yamal scored.
And Rashford actually played through the middle when he came on.
Lewandowski not in the squad, so must be injured.
Yeah. But Rashford came on and was part of the front three, but was sort of nominally the centre forward. But I was listening to Sid Lowe talking about his performance, and he did drift a bit. Naturally, he sort of drifted out left a bit to get the ball and came back inside, as he likes to do. But obviously, he likes to start on the left, but he can play any of those three positions in the front three. But it's all about minutes for Rashford. If he's fit and he's getting enough minutes for Barcelona and he's playing well, I think we saw from how Tuchel talked about him when he first selected him as a bit of a surprise selection initially. I think he obviously values him highly, rates him highly, and wants him to be part of the squad. But it's just going to be interesting to see how much he gets on the pitch at Barcelona.
Talked about Eze, who's a candidate for a left-side attacking role. We've talked about Rashford, who's a candidate for a left-side attacking role, which still feels very up for grabs. What about Jack Grealish, George? Does his move to Everton give you hope that your favourite ever footballer, apart from James Constable, might regain his place, or maybe establish himself properly as England's left-sided attacker? Or is it all over for him?
No, I mean, it's definitely not all over for him. It definitely gives me hope. I just think we're going to find out, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty bored of like the narrative around Grealish, whether it's Pep's ruined him, whether it's he's a failure, whether it's he's lost it, like all this stuff. Let's just get him back playing football again, because I think I think most importantly, people have either decided to forget or still don't accept how good he was at Villa, which I know is now a long time ago, but like he was a complete and utter genius at Villa, playing in a very different role normally on the left of a midfield three. But I can't remember, both in the Championship and then when he came up, a player who was just so much obviously better than his teammates. And I do kind of worry that might be the case a little bit with Everton. But again,
you've seen that clip of him dribbling past three players and then passing it to Beto's feet, and it bounces off straight to the opposition.
It was a good start.
Yeah.
Leeds fans enjoyed it. So, we're going to learn now what he's still got. I think when he's played for England recently, he's looked very sharp still, and looked like, certainly under Carsley, he looked like he still had the ability to basically get on the ball on the left side and just glide past players and either get fouled or create a chance or recycle the ball. It's also forgotten that he, as Dave said, he played a huge part in that treble-winning season. He's just a player that probably should have had a very different career and could have had a very different career, but his talent and his ability is still, in my mind, completely underrated. And there was a period, of course, if you think back to 2021, where he was the one player that all England fans were behind and wanted Southgate to play more often. And when he came off the bench against Germany, he changed the game. But it felt like quite a small pocket of time where he was the nation's darling. Before that, he was overrated. Now he's overrated again, or kind of been written off too early. David Moyes is clearly a relatively defensive-minded manager, but I do think with Grealish going there, he is going to be the plan. He's going to be the person that they basically give the ball whenever possible. And it was kind of similar to that with Villa and Steve Bruce, where again, for Bruce, it was just like get the ball to Jack and let him do his thing. And I think we could see that at Everton. So we're going to find out. I mean, I think because of the traffic in front of him, it might be quite hard for him to work his way in. It was interesting to note that Mike McGrath, the journalist on the England beat, suggested that Tuchel had said at some point that he saw Grealish as a starter, which I haven't seen him say on the record, but it wouldn't surprise me because I think Jack Grealish's reputation probably within football coaches and within football is very different to the perception amongst fans. Where in my mind, if you're going to list England players by pure talent, Grealish would be in the top three.
I was looking at the squad earlier on, and if you look at all the players that Tuchel has selected so far, plus a couple of others that haven't been around so far, I make it that we've got about 40 players that any one of them, with the exception maybe of some of the sort of more fringier centre-backs, any one of them could start for England, and you wouldn't really have a problem with any of them. So it's a massive challenge for Tuchel in terms of just working out how you get 23 out of 40 for and there's probably a few more that may emerge across the season as well. Maybe some of the lads who have progressed from the under 21s might now be in the mix as well, like Harvey Elliott, for example. He's not one of the 40 that I'm talking about. Jamie Gittens now playing for Chelsea. He's not one of the 40. So it's a really big challenge, and almost every position as well, as you say, there's so much traffic. And I think for someone like Grealish, there have been some reports and pieces written about him around this move to Everton, and it does seem that the omission from the Euros squad was a real big blow for him, and it seems like it did affect him quite badly psychologically and just knocked his confidence probably quite badly at the start of last season, and it all spiraled into probably the most disappointing season of his career so far. So I think for Grealish, it's about just getting back in the picture. And it's not necessarily about starting. It's can you be involved in the England squad and then come off the bench and contribute in games like he has done before. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad role for him to aspire to. But I think what's interesting to look at him this season is, I watched that Everton game on Monday night. It's one game. It was the first game away to a newly promoted side at Ellen Road. Difficult game. Everton are going to buy more players. They'll probably get better. But you do, you want Everton, from Grealish's perspective, you want Everton to not be as bad as they've been the last few years. You don't want him to be in a struggling team that maybe isn't getting much of the ball and that sort of thing. If it's a difficult season, if it's a particularly Everton-y sort of season that they often have when they struggle for 2/3 of the campaign and then eventually get out of trouble, that's not amazing for Grealish's England prospects. But on the flip side, if he becomes the sort of focal point of that team and they kind of grow into the season at the new stadium and he starts enjoying himself again, then maybe it could be good. But it's one of a number of really interesting situations, I think, to keep an eye on.
James Trafford, we'll be keeping a very close eye on him. Georgie's back at Man City, of course, where he came through the academy. He started on opening day against Wolves. I note that Pep, afterwards, when asked about Ederson and his future, gave quite a long, rambling answer where he's being quite peppy about things and included the line, "Today he would have played. The problem he had, he was ill. What happened, I don't know." So whether or not James Trafford is going to be Man City's number one still feels a little bit up in the air, not least because of some Donnarumma rumours.
Feels incredibly unlikely.
But you think he should be England's number one at the World Cup, and you made that point on Twitter, and everyone got very upset with you.
Well, a lot of Everton fans got upset.
Yeah, and Sunderland fans.
And a couple of Palace fans, because they thought it should be Henderson. And we're in a good position where it feels like we now have England's three keepers, and they're, with all respect to Nick Pope, who I do like, Aaron Ramsdale's been in and around it, but those three, Trafford, Henderson and Pickford, are quite clearly the three now, and rightly so. They're three brilliant keepers.
Really pleasing age gaps between them as well, where there's 4 or 5 years between Pickford and Henderson, 4 or 5 years between Henderson and Trafford.
But my comment about Trafford being number one next summer was kind of misconstrued as being Pickford slander. And I can understand why, if you're an Everton fan, you're sick and tired of people not giving Pickford the credit he deserves, because he's been unbelievable for them and he's been unbelievable for England, and there's no denying that. But I kind of hate, and I don't really agree with the idea that with international football, if you've been really good, then your place is yours until you lose it. I don't think that's how it works, especially not when you change manager. I think for Gareth Southgate, over a decade, if he trusts a player like Pickford, then he's not going to drop him. But if you're Thomas Tuchel and you're here to win the World Cup, if you think there's a better keeper out there, you're going to make the change, especially when they're very different keepers in many respects. I think Trafford is the long-term answer, and I was really excited for his move to Newcastle, because I thought at Newcastle he would really prove himself to be elite, because people's only memory of him seemingly at the moment is the season at Burnley in the Premier League, where he'd just played a full campaign in League One and had done very well at Bolton, and then playing for a team under Vincent Kompany who just were not equipped at all for the test of the Premier League, who were defensively shambolic. He was massively exposed, and that's not to say that he performed well. He didn't perform well at all, but at the same time, it was a horrendous assignment where he ended up being dropped for the last 8 or 9 games. In my mind, that was probably more to protecting him rather than thinking that Muric was any better than him. But it's still always the tag now, like this guy got dropped for Muric. So what are you talking about? He's better than Pickford. I thought and assumed, like other people, that the move for City to bring him in was so that he would play, or like the very least be like a competitive kind of for the number one spot with Ederson. But it just feels like, is it done for like just to bring in a homegrown player? Has it been done because they had an option to do it after selling him to Burnley in the first place? They didn't want him to go to Newcastle. I
think both are important factors, probably, as sad as it is to say.
And it's a massive shame. I do think there's a chance if Donnarumma does come in, he might not work. Obviously, as a shot stopper, he's phenomenal. But like for what Pep wants you to do with the ball at your feet, it feels like a really clunky fit. In which case, Trafford could profit from that. But last season he was, despite a lot of Burnley fans claiming it was their defence rather than Trafford, the numbers suggest it was like an outlier of ridiculous proportions in terms of shot stopping. And anyone that watched any neutrals or anyone that watched Burnley last season would have seen the saves that he made. Like, if you look at goals prevented, I think it was about 14 was his number, which in itself was about the same as Victor Janssen. But given that Victor Janssen was facing about 70 XG over the course of the season, whereas Trafford was only facing about 35, 30 in terms of post-shot expected goals, like the ratio of what he was saving was absolutely ridiculous, like almost like 50%. And he's very, very good with the ball at his feet. He commands his area really well. He's, I think, just going to be very quickly be obvious that he's an elite keeper. And to my mind, someone who maybe is a more complete keeper than Pickford, despite Pickford obviously being an unbelievable shot stopper and a very confident distributor too. So I'm just gutted that it looks like this is going to be a move. This summer should have been the move that made James Trafford for this season ahead of the World Cup. Instead, despite a promising, debut for City, it looks like it's going to be the thing that probably kills it.
But as much as you love James Trafford and I love James Trafford, from an England point of view, Dave, it doesn't feel like a huge issue, this particular one, in that Pickford has always been excellent for England, was excellent for Everton last season, and probably will be again for England and Everton this season, and will probably be our number one at the World Cup, and that's unlikely to cause anyone any major issues. And then that's not even mentioning Dean Henderson, whose performances in the last 6 months in particular have been exceptional as well.
Yeah, it's not a massive problem position for us at all. My question on this, and this is entirely self-serving, but do you think James Trafford will play for England this season?
Great question.
And I'll explain why it's self-serving before you answer.
Okay.
So I'm in a predictions league,
right.
With a couple of mates. And it's not just like who's going to finish where. It's like loads and loads of different categories for things that are going to happen this season, like head-to-heads and all sorts. It's really good. And one of the categories is you had to pick a player who's going to make their debut for either England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland this season. And I went for James Trafford.
I think he'll...
And I'm a bit worried.
Surely you could have found a Welsh or Scottish player.
I did have a look for the younger Colwell brother for Wales.
Oh, Joel Colwell. That's a great shout.
But Joel will.
I didn't want to overthink it.
I have a feeling he might play one of the two games next month. Basically, reason for that being, it's pretty... Like, this is what, Everton fans are like, this is mad. Like, it's pretty telling that he should and could have been England's number one in the under-21 Euros. And Thomas Tuchel wanted him with the senior squad for that camp.
But then Henderson played against Senegal and Trafford didn't.
That's my point. Yeah, but I'm still saying he's third in the pack. We only had 2 games, so you couldn't play all 3 of them unless you're going to do half and half.
Oh, I know. I'm just not sure if Tuchel is going to bother trying them all out at this point.
But this is before his move, right?
Yeah.
So I think, having played a Premier League game for City, and he'll probably play again this coming weekend, and he'll probably play again until the keeper thing is sorted, providing it'll be the 3 again, and providing that Tuchel's already done Pickford in one game, another keeper in the other, I reckon it might be Trafford in one, Pickford in the other.
We're going into the attacking realm once again. I'm going to talk about Noni Madueke, who's an Arsenal player now, signed from Chelsea this summer, and as a player, I'm higher on Madueke, I think, than a lot of people seem to be. And
very harsh treatment from the football Twitter off the back of that transfer, wasn't it? Yeah. Like laughing at Arsenal.
Yeah, interesting one. There's things I feel good about and things I don't feel so good about, which I guess is the nature of high-profile transfers and joining teams with a lot of competition for places. We've already talked about Arsenal from an Eze point of view. From a Madueke point of view, the reason I like him more than most is that I think people focus too much on what he doesn't do at an elite level, and in doing so kind of ignore the fact that what he does do very well is very, very rare, incredibly attractive to managers, particularly Thomas Tuchel, and does it better than pretty much anyone else that we have, other than maybe Jack Grealish in his prime. And that is, Madueke gets you from outside the box into the box about as well as anyone else in terms of his explosive speed from a standing start. He's got physical strength, which means he can shrug defenders off as he goes past them. He does go both ways, albeit when he goes right, not a lot normally comes from the cross. This is what I'm talking about. People focus on his final action, his shot or his crossing, his decision-making. On that level, there's no doubt that right now Madueke is not a patch on Bukayo Saka, is not a patch on Cole Palmer. At that moment of a shot or a cross or an assist, he's not on that level. But when it comes to dribbling from wide areas into the box, particularly against set defences, deep defences, he is exceptional, and he's still so young that we might expect him to improve. He improved a lot in the space of the last 12 months at Chelsea, particularly when it came to his shot selection, improved a lot. His finishing has not got that much better, but hopefully he might develop on that front. My point is, even if he doesn't, I still think from an England point of view, it's an interesting profile to have in the squad. He started off the left against Andorra and played really well and was our most dangerous attacking player in that game, where some others like Palmer, Bellingham and Saka, can't remember who played off the right, Rodgers it was, didn't have as much of an impact. For Arsenal, he's not going to play in front of Saka, so again we're looking at that left-hand side. I've never been a big Martinelli fan, so I'm really looking forward to the day where I don't have to watch him play.
He could be the rotation option for Saka though, couldn't he?
He could be a rotation option for Saka, for Arsenal and for England. But in terms of regular minutes, off the left at Arsenal is where it's going to have to come, where he's got Martinelli, he's got Trossard, he's got Eze perhaps to battle with as well. Again, the pathway to like weekly 90 minutes for Madueke at Arsenal doesn't seem that obvious. So again, I wonder if you might lose some momentum.
One area
basically.
as well.
Yeah, one area as well, I guess. It's probably slated for Saka's replacement minutes. But Madueke did come on for Martinelli on opening weekend when Trossard, for example, was left on the bench. So I think that Tuchel will really appreciate what Madueke does very well. He's been explicit about what he wants his wingers to do, and it's basically get the ball and dribble. And a lot of the English wingers don't seem to feel that comfortable in that role. Foden didn't, Bowen didn't, Rashford looked like he wanted to do it but wasn't doing it particularly well in the games that he played. So there's absolutely a chance that Madueke could have impressed Tuchel in that last camp and might do so again if he picks him for the next squad. I'm not that hot on his prospects of being a star player for Arsenal, but I do think I basically think there's a small gap that he needs to squeeze through, and he might have to take opportunities immediately in the first month or two of the season. Quite good at squeezing gaps, but then he needs to finish as well, and that's the problem. I think, clearly we all think that the left side currently is pretty much up for grabs, and he's a contender for that. We should mention Jamie Gittens as well, who's essentially a replacement for him at Chelsea. Has 40 starts in the Bundesliga already in his career. He just turned 21. Another dribbler, England under 21 caps. He's obviously right now clearly much further down the pecking order than a lot of others, but he has played off the left consistently, whereas Madueke, per transfer market, has only actually played off the left like 10 times in his career so far. So we'll see what happens with Gittins. He's obviously got a lot of ground to make up to fight his way into the squad, and rumours about Chelsea signing Garnacho are unlikely to help him get significant minutes there as well. So a couple of really interesting ones. Liam Delap is a Chelsea striker as well. He didn't start on opening weekend. João Pedro started at the top of the pitch. They're very different strikers, which gives me hope that in kind of horses for courses approach, there might be games where Delap is favoured. And again, we're talking about the very, very sharp end of football right now, the elite clubs and England national team. Guys like Delap have to take any opportunities that they get.
He's got to get past Ivan Toney though, isn't he, for England?
Well, for England, it's Kane, Watkins, Toney and Solanke, and then Delap right now. So
Solanke didn't start for Spurs at the weekend either, did he?
So very interesting on that.
If Rashford's starting through the middle for Barcelona, then where does he fit?
But Delap's just
hybrid.
Fascinating for me because for him to properly step up at Chelsea and do the business early on would be a lot of stepping up in a short space of time. 2 seasons ago, he was playing for Hull in the Championship, scored 8 goals, It was a decent goal return. It was much better than the previous season where he split it at Stoke and Preston and scored 4. And then obviously 12 last season at Ipswich was perfect. You have to wonder whether there was something about playing for that Ipswich team, even though they were up against it in most games, that kind of suited, basically like enhanced his skills, and maybe wasn't asking him to do some of the stuff that people don't think he's so good at, which is operate in a tight, packed penalty box, get shots away first time, score headed goals, all things of that front. So I still think a lot of development for Delap, but we should be very excited about him as a prospect. And I can't quite work out if we should be excited that he's gone to Chelsea, or whether from an England point of view it might have been better for him to have a sort of bridging move in between. But we'll never know.
One other player I think we should touch on is another Palace player for now, Marc Guehi. Doesn't seem as advanced compared to Eze in terms of whether he'll go yet, but Liverpool are still being linked with him. And
they seemingly want to sell him because of his contract situation.
So if again, similar to Eze in terms of if he leaves Palace and goes to Liverpool, I mean, he's already from the last tournament, last summer at the Euros, he was the centre back alongside John Stones, and he had his injury problems as well, so hasn't featured in all of Tuchel's squads so far. But I think the centre back situation is really interesting. We haven't seen John Stones yet for Tuchel yet either. But if you go with Stones as being like the outstanding senior centre back, we saw Tuchel with his arm round Stones training video the other day. So if you have Stones, and I think it's still up for grabs in terms of if they're playing a conventional back four and there's two centre backs, who's the other one? Quansah did well in the last camp, but Guehi would feel like he's got as much chance of anyone of grabbing that spot, and I think his chances get boosted if he goes to Liverpool.
For sure. Well, we know Tuchel just loves any of his players playing for the best possible clubs, challenging for the top titles. So other transfers, just to whiz through, Kyle Walker, he'll be playing for Burnley this season. We'll see whether he retains kind of England interest or whether he kind of drops off as part of what will likely be a relegation battle. Poor performances in the June camp and lots of players who can play right back, whether it's Trent, Reece James, even someone like Livramento, who is surely going to be a better Premier League player than Kyle Walker.
I think it's time to say thank you and goodbye, Kyle.
And I'm sure you'd say the same about Jordan Henderson, who is now back in the Premier League.
Thank you and goodbye.
Brentford, thank you and goodbye, says George to Jordan Henderson. Jarell Quansah now plays for Leverkusen. It'll be interesting if he can stay in the picture while playing overseas. The likes of Fikayo Tomori have found that very difficult, for example. And Jacob Ramsey, I just want to mention, because he's moved to Newcastle, and he was somewhat surprisingly name-checked by Tuchel in his first ever press conference for his first squad announcement as someone who he felt had just missed out at that time. So he's clearly someone that is on Tuchel's radar, if perhaps not the radar of, I would say, your average England fan, someone to keep an eye on at Newcastle based on what Eddie Howe has done with Jacob Murphy and players like that. I think we should be pretty excited about Jacob Ramsey's prospects. And you mentioned Guehi. Conor Gallagher is linked to a move to Spurs from Atletico Madrid. We obviously had a big hoo-ha with Morgan Gibbs-White, who signed that new contract to Forest. And I wonder if, for his England prospects, that might not have been the best thing for him, but is obviously very happy to be staying with Mr. Marinakis. So, there's a squad to announce next week. We'll be reacting to it for sure. There'll be some clamour in the days building up to it. Let's get in front of the clamour with a quick bit of clamour watch. What do you want to see, or who do you want to see in the squad? Maybe even the starting 11, George. Give us one strong desire for the upcoming games.
I think I've said this every time we've done this. So Adam Wharton hasn't played a minute of football in an England senior shirt since he made his debut before the Euros in 2024, which just, given the season that he's had, I think injury has scuppered him a couple of times, but given the season that he's had at Palace, like it's time to integrate him. Like it's time to get this guy. Like our midfield's been lacking a player like him for so long. He's fit. He started the first game of the season for Palace and played 90 against Chelsea. He's off the back of an FA Cup win. If he's going to play a big part, as he should, in America, Mexico and Canada next summer, we need to start giving him minutes now and seeing how he works with Rice. So, he has to be in the squad and he has to get minutes, in my mind.
Do you want to do some clamouring?
Not really, actually.
Good.
No.
You're more of a clamour observer, I would suggest.
Clamourless.
Okay. A cliché's clamour.
Can I take a second clamour then?
Yeah. All right.
Can we like maybe not play Harry Kane for quite a lot of these 2 games.
Oh, here we go.
Can we just accept? No, just accept that like there is a chance that sometimes, because Harry is the most mobile, we don't look very good with him playing up front, and maybe let's just give Ollie Watkins like a whole game and just see how it goes.
Well, I agree, but I've retired from saying it out loud because I've said it too many times, and I just feel it's completely futile at this point. My clamour is for Elliot Anderson. We had such a good time in June, didn't we, covering the under-21s triumph out in Slovakia. Elliot Anderson was the best player for England as they won that tournament. He made an eye-catching start to the season for Forest over the weekend. He adds a lot to our midfield, I think, and in particular, if we were to have a group of midfielders that had Curtis Jones, Adam Wharton, Declan Rice and Elliot Anderson, I would see Jones and Wharton as being, battling for one spot as the kind of deep ball progressor, and Rice and Anderson being able to dovetail quite nicely as kind of rampagers. And every time I watch him, he looks better, and you just wonder how much better he might get from this point. And if he gets significantly better, we're going to have another absurdly good footballer to try and fit into this England team. So I'd love to see Elliot Anderson in the squad. And I just want to say, keep an eye out for Mason Mount. I know he's kind of the forgotten man.
Another
he played
Chelsea
well
boy.
last weekend. He's Tuchel's Bezzy mate. They go for beers. He absolutely loves him.
False 9.
As does every manager he's ever managed, Mason Mount, because he can do stuff like play false 9 or basically any position you want him to, and you broadly know what you're going to get from him. You probably know what you're not going to get from him as well, and I think managers quite like knowing all of that stuff. I think if he has a good game this weekend for United, I just wouldn't be surprised if Tuchel can't resist. Yeah. So let's see. We'll be reacting to the England squad for games against Andorra and Serbia on the next episode of the England Pod. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the pod feed and or the YouTube channel. Drop us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on some of the stuff we've talked about today. And join us next time on the England Pod. Cheers. Go well.